The wind screams through the Dordogne Valley in southwestern France. Temperatures have dropped to minus 15 degrees Celsius, cold enough to cause frostbite in under 10 minutes. A modern human without proper gear would be dead in 3 hours. Yet, 60,000 years ago, a Neanderthal mother wraps her children in waterproof hides as darkness falls. She has no matches, no lighter, no way to reliably start a fire, and according to shocking new evidence, fire that appears and vanishes unpredictably, sometimes absent for entire seasons. For 400,000 winters, Neanderthals conquered Earth's most brutal cold despite inconsistent fire technology. The answer to this seeming impossibility transforms everything we thought we knew about human evolution. Archaeologists excavating Roc de Marsal in France made a disturbing discovery. During the coldest glacial periods, they found tools, bones, living spaces, but mysterious fire gaps throughout the occupation layers. No charcoal, no ash, no burnt anything for extended periods. These weren't abandoned camps. The tool assemblages show continuous use. The bones show butchering marks. People were definitely living here, but for months at a time, we find absolutely no evidence of fire. Dr. Maurice Seresi, lead archaeologist on the project, still sounds shocked years after the discovery. Families lived here for months during brutal Ice Age winters, with fire that disappeared when they needed it most. This discovery revolutionized our understanding of Neanderthal survival, because across multiple sites, the same pattern emerged. Continuous occupation through glacial periods, despite fire use variations that should have made survival impossible. At first, scientists assumed the evidence was simply missing. Maybe erosion erased the hearths. Maybe they burned fire outside the caves where it wouldn't be preserved. But then came Bruniquel Cave, and everything changed. Deep beneath southwestern France, in absolute darkness, 336 meters from any daylight, archaeologists discovered something that defied all expectations. Inside Bruniquel Cave, Neanderthals had built precise circular monuments from 400 broken stalagmites. Total weight, 2 tons of stone. Age, 176,500 years old. Let that number sink in. This structure is older than any known human construction by 140,000 years. That gap is longer than the entire history of Homo sapiens as a species. Neanderthals were building monuments before we even existed. When we first dated these structures, we ran the tests 3 times. We thought there was a mistake, because the implications, they're staggering. Dr. Jacques Joubert, who led the excavation, still seems amazed. Think about what this means. These structures required planning, coordination between multiple individuals, work schedules, team meetings, and most importantly, artificial lighting to work in total darkness 336 meters underground. They were architects before architecture existed. But the significance for survival becomes even clearer when you understand cave thermodynamics. These underground chambers maintain constant temperatures year-round. When the surface drops to deadly cold, deep caves stay around 13 degrees Celsius, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. According to speleological studies, that's a massive temperature difference without burning a single piece of wood. Have you ever been in a cave during summer and felt how cool it stays? or visited one in winter and noticed how warm it feels compared to outside. That's the principle Neanderthals exploited, natural geothermal stability. But they didn't just use caves, they engineered them. Watch what happens next. At La Farasse, another site in southwestern France. Neanderthals didn't just occupy caves, they renovated them. Archaeologists found intentionally excavated pits, carved deep into sterile sediment layers. These weren't graves, they weren't storage pits. The positioning is too specific, too deliberate. These pits are located exactly where rising body heat would collect and circulate back into the living area. Dr. Harold Dibble, who excavated the site, recognized the pattern immediately. The consistent east-west orientation across multiple sites, separated by hundreds of kilometers, suggests shared architectural knowledge. Prehistoric building codes passed down through generations. At Molodova in Ukraine, they built a dome structure using 116 mammoth bones. The construction required mathematical calculation to achieve structural stability. Age, 44,000 years ago. At Riparo Bombrini in Italy, archaeologists documented 3-tier thermal zones, warm air rising to sleeping levels at the top, activity zones in the middle where people worked, cold storage areas below where they kept meat fresh. Tool-making debris was concentrated in specific areas, not random. They were working where movement would generate body heat without wasting the warmth they'd accumulated. This isn't coincidence. This is engineering. The narrative shifts dramatically when we examine Neanderthal fire technology itself. For decades, every anthropology textbook stated confidently that Neanderthals mastered fire 400,000 years ago. Case closed. But in 2018, French researchers analyzing 59 French hand axes discovered something that rewrote the textbooks. Micro-wear analysis, revealing strike-a-light fire-making technology, only appears in the last 50,000 years of Neanderthal existence. Before that, they could maintain fire when they had it, keep it burning, preserve embers, but creating it on demand, reliably, was beyond their capability. We keep discovering that Neanderthals did things we thought only modern humans could do. Then we find out they did it first. But fire technology, that's where they struggled. Dr. Ceresi's assessment challenges decades of assumptions. Consider the implications. Imagine fire that works sometimes, but disappears for weeks during storms. During resource scarcity, when you can't find the right rocks for striking. During seasonal changes, when everything is wet. Every winter becomes a gamble, unless you develop alternatives that work when fire fails. And that's exactly what they did. Neanderthals became chemical engineers at multiple French sites. They collected manganese dioxide, not for cave paintings like we initially thought, but because it lowers wood's ignition temperature by 200 degrees Celsius, 360 degrees Fahrenheit, making unreliable fire-starting attempts more successful. Some sites show they traveled 40 kilometers to collect this material. That's a 3-day round trip in Ice Age conditions, just for fire-starting material. Think about that commitment. 3 days of travel, through freezing conditions, just to improve their odds of making fire. When fire was available, they maximized its potential with sophisticated thermal engineering. At Abric Romani in Spain, archaeologists documented 8 evenly spaced hearths lined against the rock walls. Computer modeling by the University of Reading team in 2025 shows this spacing created convection currents that circulated heat optimally, while simultaneously providing smoke ventilation to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning. At Kabara Cave in Israel, dense concentrations of hearths created distinct thermal zones, specialized areas for sleeping, for cooking, for working, all designed around heat flow patterns. They understood thermal dynamics at a level that's frankly impressive even by modern standards. Dr. Stephen Kuhn, who studied the site, found evidence of deliberate heat management. But when fire wasn't available, during resource scarcity, extreme storms, or before they perfected firemaking, their alternative technologies had to be perfect, or they died. February 45,000 BC, Pech de Lazay, southwestern France. A grandmother teaches her granddaughter to smooth leather using a polished bone tool. Outside, the cold could kill in minutes. Inside the cave, without fire, they work by feel and muscle memory in the dim light. The child's fingers learn movements, pressure points, techniques, skills that won't be written down for 44,950 years. This is how civilizations really begin, not with grand inventions, but with one grandmother, one child, one skill that means survival. The tools they're using, archaeologists found them perfectly preserved at multiple sites across Europe. Lissoires, bone tools for leather working, identical, and I mean identical, to tools used today by Hermes and Louis Vuitton for waterproofing luxury leather. Neanderthals invented them 10,000 years before modern humans even arrived in Europe. But here's what's fascinating. Despite abundant reindeer bones at every site, they specifically chose ribs from large bovids, ancient cattle. Why? Material science gives us the answer. Bovid ribs have the exact density, porosity, and flexibility required for leather working. The wrong bone would either tear the hide or fail to compress the fibers properly. Dr. Marie-Hélène Moncel, who studied these tools, tested dozens of bone types. Only bovid ribs worked correctly, which means Neanderthals understood material properties at a level we're only now appreciating. At Neumark Nord in Germany, 200,000-year-old stone scrapers still contain oak bark tannin traces, the oldest evidence of chemical hide processing by any hominid. Tanning, the chemical process, transforms protein structures in animal hides, creating flexible, waterproof leather that retains insulation properties even when wet. Without this chemistry, leather freezes solid in winter temperatures, becomes brittle, cracks, useless. But with proper tanning, you get material that can save your life. The fiber revolution runs parallel to their leather technology. At Abri-du-Maras in France, archaeologists discovered 50,000-year-old 3-ply cord made from inner bark fibers, each strand twisted at precisely 30 degrees for maximum tensile strength. This isn't random twisting, this is engineered rope. The angle matters. Too tight and it becomes brittle. Too loose and it lacks strength. Modern rope engineers confirmed the design was optimal while lacking eyed needles, which wouldn't be invented for another 10,000 years. They used bone awls and twisted fiber thread to create multi-layered garments with multiple repairs, showing long-term use. Have you ever tried to sew something without a needle? Just using a pointed stick and thread, the frustration, the difficulty, the patience required, that's what every Neanderthal garment represents. Hours of painstaking work, just to stay warm. Now imagine this scene from 125,000 years ago. Beside a lake in central Germany, dozens of Neanderthals work in coordinated teams. They're not hunting, they're running a factory. The 2024 discovery at Neumarkt Nord revealed an industrial operation processing over 172 elephants and rhinos across multiple seasons, multiple years. But here's the shocking part. They weren't primarily harvesting meat. They were after fat. Specialized production lines sorted bones by fat content. Systematically crushed long bones to extract marrow. Then processed the fragments again to render out every drop of grease. The cut mark patterns are standardized, identical across hundreds of bones. This is assembly line processing, division of labor, specialization. The fat from one mammoth could waterproof an entire family's winter wardrobe. Bone fragments cluster in processing areas, separate from living spaces, maintaining hygiene, preventing contamination. The extracted grease became prehistoric technology's Swiss Army knife, mixed with hide fibers for waterproof fabric, combined with ochre for sunblock protection, applied to stone tool hafts to prevent frozen hands from sticking, stored as emergency food, providing 9 calories per gram, double what protein provides. This single site operated 100,000 years before any comparable modern human facility, and it reveals something profound about Neanderthal cognition. They understood industrial-scale planning, resource management, long-term storage, seasonal preparation at levels we've only recently rediscovered in modern industrial processing. But all of this technology, impressive as it is, wouldn't work without one crucial factor: the Neanderthal body itself. Neanderthal anatomy reveals purpose-built adaptations for Ice Age survival that complement their technological innovations. Start with the nose. CT scans reveal nasal passages 29% larger than modern humans, with internal turbinates, the bony structures inside, arranged like industrial heat exchangers. Freezing air would enter the nostrils, spiral through these passages, warming from blood vessel contact as it moved deeper until it reached the lungs at body temperature. Dr. Todd Ray, who studies Neanderthal respiratory anatomy, found remarkable efficiency. Modern human noses evolved for thermal efficiency, recovering 90 to 95% of heat energy from exhaled air. But Neanderthal noses were engineered as high-performance air movers. Their barrel-shaped ribcage provided 50 liters per minute of airflow, nearly double our 27 liters per minute. This massive respiratory system powered a metabolic furnace, burning 5,000 to 7,000 calories daily in winter conditions. For comparison, modern humans burn about 2,000 to 3,000 calories daily. They needed that extraordinary airflow capacity to fuel their Ice Age metabolism. The stocky build represents perfect thermal engineering. Shorter limbs reduce surface area exposed to cold. Broader torsos maintain core temperature more efficiently. Mathematical modeling by anthropologist Christopher Ruff shows 20% better heat retention than modern humans. Every aspect of their body plan, from limb proportions to muscle mass distribution, optimizes heat generation and conservation. Isotope analysis shows they maintained these metabolic rates year-round, permanently set to Arctic survival mode, generating internal heat equivalent to a continuous 40-watt heating system, running 24/7 just from their metabolism. Combine this biological heating system with waterproof insulated clothing and underground shelters, and suddenly, fire transforms from necessity to luxury, a nice-to-have rather than must-have. Without reliable fire, every architectural decision became life or death. And Neanderthals made those decisions with stunning consistency across their entire range. From Gibraltar in the south to the Altai Mountains in the east, Neanderthal shelters consistently face south or southwest. Engineering that maximizes solar heat gained during winter, while minimizing wind exposure from prevailing northern storms. Computer modeling confirms they achieved optimal thermal performance for their specific latitudes. These aren't random cave selections. Every single major Neanderthal site we've excavated across 40 years of research shows the same orientation principles. Dr. John Speth, who mapped hundreds of sites, found 0 exceptions. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, stacked stone walls created separate chambers, following natural thermal gradients, warm air rising to upper levels, cool air sinking to lower storage areas. At Kabara Cave, sleeping areas form perfect circles, bodies positioned facing inward. Thermal physics that maximizes heat sharing between individuals, while maintaining ventilation pathways to prevent deadly CO2 buildup. Mathematical modeling confirms this arrangement could maintain 15 degrees Celsius, 59 degrees Fahrenheit, using only metabolic heat when outside conditions drop to lethal levels. 6 adults sleeping in this configuration, generating 40 watts each, produces 240 watts of continuous heat, enough to keep the space survivable. At Sierra de Atapuerca in Spain, repeated seasonal occupation over tens of thousands of years. The same caves returned to generation after generation, complete tool-making sequences found at each level, indicating sophisticated settlement planning with permanent winter homes. These weren't nomads wandering randomly. This is evidence of territorial knowledge passed down through families. My great-great-great-grandfather used this cave. Now I do too. In 2025, experimental archaeologists decided to test Neanderthal technologies, not in a lab, in actual conditions. Volunteers lived for 3 weeks in reconstructed Neanderthal shelters, wearing reproduced clothing using only materials and techniques available 60,000 years ago, using only available technologies, no modern shortcuts. The results shocked everyone. Birch bark tar waterproofing, made using ancient techniques, outperformed modern beeswax, remaining supple and flexible at minus 40 degrees Celsius. While beeswax cracked and failed, multi-component adhesives created bonds stronger than some modern commercial glues. The layered clothing system maintained core body temperature at minus 30 degrees Celsius, minus 22 Fahrenheit, for extended periods. Underground shelters achieved 20 to 22 degrees Celsius warmer temperatures than the surface, without any heating source, just body heat and thermal mass. Most importantly, the complete system created redundancy, multiple fail-safes. If clothing got wet, shelter compensated. If shelter was compromised, clothing and metabolic adaptations maintained core temperature. If fire was lost, the other systems were sufficient. Dr. Metin Aaron, who led the experiment, emphasized the sophistication. This wasn't primitive survival. This was sophisticated risk management, engineered redundancy, systems thinking. Neanderthals weren't our primitive cousins. They were our teachers in survival technology. And we almost lost their lessons forever. If that doesn't fundamentally change how you see human evolution, nothing will. But the archaeological record reveals something beyond survival strategies, something that might be even more important. It documents care. At La Ferracie, a child with severe congenital abnormalities survived to age 3, only possible with constant care in harsh Ice Age conditions. This child couldn't walk, couldn't feed themselves, required round-the-clock attention. For 3 years, someone carried this child, fed this child, protected this child. During Ice Age winters when resources were scarce and every calorie mattered, at Shanidar Cave, an elderly male with a withered arm and blindness in one eye, injuries sustained years before his death. He lived for years after these disabilities, supported by his community through multiple brutal winters. He couldn't hunt, couldn't contribute in traditional ways, but they kept him alive, fed him, sheltered him for years. These weren't brutal savages. They were families who refused to leave anyone behind. Even when survival was marginal, even when resources were scarce, they chose compassion. Have you ever cared for someone who couldn't care for themselves? A sick parent? A disabled child? An injured friend? The exhaustion, the sacrifice, the commitment required? That's what these Neanderthal families did. For years, without modern medicine, without social services, just refusing to give up on each other. The significance for today becomes startlingly clear. Neanderthals survived 400,000 years of climate volatility, with stone tools, no electricity, no fossil fuels. They weathered ice ages that make our current climate concerns look mild. Temperature swings of 15 to 20 degrees Celsius in a single generation. Massive glacial advances, sea level changes of 120 meters. Yet they survived it all for 400,000 years. But then they went extinct when climate change happened too fast, too unpredictably. The difference? They had generations to adapt to slow changes, centuries to develop new strategies. We have decades, maybe less. Right now, 4 billion people live in regions that regularly experience extreme temperatures. Every year, cold exposure kills more people than all natural disasters combined. The solutions Neanderthals developed aren't just history. They're blueprints for survival. Military Arctic units studied Neanderthal shelter designs. Disaster relief organizations examined their redundant systems approach. Climate adaptation researchers analyze their resource management. Everything we're rediscovering about cold weather survival, passive heating, thermal mass, layered insulation, Neanderthals knew 60,000 years ago. But their innovations offer more than technical solutions. They offer hope. Every principle they discovered, thermal efficiency, resource conservation, community cooperation, applies directly to our climate challenges. They proved adaptation is possible. The question is, will we learn from them in time? The answer to Neanderthal extinction isn't about capability. It's about demographics and unprecedented climate chaos. During marine isotope stage 3, approximately 39,000 years ago, climate became catastrophically unstable. Seasonal patterns that had remained consistent for millennia suddenly shifted every few years. Resources Neanderthals had relied on for hundreds of thousands of years disappeared unpredictably. Reindeer migration routes changed. Plant distribution shifted. Water sources vanished. Genetic analysis reveals their effective population was always small, perhaps 5,000 to 70,000 individuals scattered across all of Eurasia. For context, that's fewer people than a modern small town, spread across an entire continent. Modern humans arrived with populations 10 times larger. When extreme climate chaos struck, larger populations had better odds through demographic resilience. Not superior technology, not bigger brains, just more people, more chances for someone to survive and reproduce. Dr. Svante Pääbo, who sequenced the Neanderthal genome, found evidence of severe population bottlenecks, multiple near extinctions over their history, each time barely recovering, until the final collapse. But here's the twist that changes everything. When modern humans first encountered Neanderthals in Europe, our archaeological record suddenly shows nearly identical technologies appearing in modern human sites. The lissoir leatherworking tools, the systematic use of manganese dioxide for fire starting, specific hafting techniques for attaching stone points to spears, all appearing simultaneously with first contact. We didn't replace Neanderthals through superiority. We learned from them, copied their technologies, inherited their knowledge. The genetic evidence proves we didn't just learn from them, we interbred with them. 2 to 4% of non-African human DNA comes from Neanderthals. Their genes still live in us, affecting our immune systems, our skin color, our ability to process fats, our tolerance for cold. But before we consider what was lost, remember what they achieved. At El Cedron Cave in Spain, genetic evidence reveals a Neanderthal mother and infant who died together. Isotope analysis shows the child was well nourished until the end. Even facing starvation, she prioritized her baby's survival. The clothing fragments found with them show multiple repairs. She was mending their gear even as food ran out, trying until the last possible moment. 400,000 winters, no electricity, no metal, fire that came and went like the seasons. They survived longer than our species has existed. Homo sapiens, modern humans, have been around for maybe 300,000 years. Neanderthals lasted 400,000. Fire wasn't their greatest invention. Their greatest invention was refusing to accept impossibility, looking at brutal conditions and saying, we'll find a way, looking at unreliable technology and saying, we'll build backups, looking at vulnerable family members and saying, we're not leaving anyone behind. And somewhere in the 2 to 4% of Neanderthal genes most of us carry, that invention lives on. That refusal to quit, that creative adaptation, that fierce loyalty to family and community. Detailed clothing technology section, but let's get specific about how they actually stayed warm without reliable fire. The clothing technology alone represents generations of refinement. At Pech de la Zee, archaeologists found specialized scraping tools with specific wear patterns. The microscopic scratches on these tools tell us exactly how they were used. The angle, the pressure, the motion. This is hide processing at an expert level. Dr. Bruce Hardy, who analyzes tool microwear, can reconstruct entire processes from tool marks. The first step, removing flesh and fat from fresh hides, using sharp stone flakes with beveled edges, specific scraping angles to avoid damaging the skin. If you scrape too hard, you tear through the hide. Too soft, you leave fat that will rot. The angle has to be perfect. The pressure has to be consistent. Modern leather workers confirmed Neanderthals were using optimal techniques. Next, stretching the hide while still wet, using wooden frames or simply staking it to the ground. This prevents shrinkage during drying, maintains flexibility. Unstretched hide dries into rigid leather, useless for clothing. Stretching during drying is crucial. Then, the chemical processing. Oak bark contains tannins, complex organic molecules. When combined with animal hide proteins, they bond, creating stable cross-links that prevent decomposition, making leather waterproof, making it flexible even when frozen. The chemistry is complex, but Neanderthals figured it out 200,000 years ago without laboratories or textbooks. The tanning process takes weeks, soaking hides in bark-infused water, changing the solution regularly, testing texture and flexibility. This requires patience, planning, understanding that today's work won't pay off for weeks. That's sophisticated future thinking. Finally, softening the tanned leather using bone lissoirs to compress fibers, breaking down remaining stiffness, creating supple material perfect for clothing. The lissoir technique produces leather comparable to modern luxury goods. Hermes uses the same principles today. At Combe Grenal in France, archaeologists found evidence of fur processing. Tiny cut marks on small animal bones. Rabbits, foxes, hares. They were carefully removing pelts without damaging the fur. This is precision work, valuable winter insulation. The fur pelts were then processed differently than hide leather, stretched immediately, treated with animal fats to preserve softness, sometimes smoked to prevent insect damage. Fur requires different handling than hide. The techniques are distinct. Neanderthals knew both. The final garments combined multiple materials: leather outer layers for wind and water resistance, fur inner layers for insulation, sinew binding the pieces together. We're talking about multi-component garments, not simple wraps. Actual constructed clothing with different materials serving different functions. At Prolom II in Crimea, a Neanderthal site from 60,000 years ago, researchers found evidence of tailored clothing, not just draped hides, but shaped garments. The bone awl marks suggest they were punching holes in specific patterns, creating shapes, fitting pieces together. This is tailoring. Have you ever tried to make clothing from scratch, without a sewing machine, without patterns, just raw materials and hand tools? The skill required, the patience, the understanding of how materials drape and fit. That's what every Neanderthal garment represents. The waterproofing technology deserves special attention because staying dry in Ice Age winters meant survival. Wet clothing loses insulation value, can actually accelerate hypothermia. Neanderthals developed multiple waterproofing strategies. Animal fat, rendered from bones, provided the base, mixed with plant resins for durability, sometimes combined with beeswax when available. The mixture had to be applied while warm, then worked into the leather fibers. Too much, and the leather becomes stiff. Too little, and water penetrates. Dr. Bruce Hardy, tested ancient waterproofing formulas, using archaeological residue analysis to determine ratios. The Neanderthal formulas outperformed modern commercial leather treatments in some tests, especially flexibility at extreme cold. At Hohlfels in Germany, chemical analysis revealed complex multi-component waterproofing, animal fat, plant resin, mineral oxides, all mixed together. This isn't random. Each component serves a purpose. The fat penetrates fibers, the resin creates surface protection. The minerals add durability, it's chemistry. The layering system maximized efficiency. Inner fur layer against skin, trapping warm air. Middle leather layer, providing wind protection. Outer waterproofed layer, shedding rain and snow. Modern cold weather gear uses the same principle: base layer, insulation layer, shell layer. Neanderthals figured this out 60,000 years ago. But clothing alone wasn't enough. They needed footwear. The experimental archaeologists tested this, walking in Ice Age conditions without proper footwear. Frostbite set in within 30 minutes. Without foot protection, you're crippled quickly. Evidence of Neanderthal footwear is rare. Organic materials don't preserve well, but indirect evidence exists. At Fumane Cave in Italy, ochre patterns on the ground suggest foot wrappings, staining from wrapped hides. The pattern is consistent with wrapped foot coverings, not boots, but functional protection. The wrappings likely combined fur and leather, fur inside for warmth, leather outside for durability, tied with sinew or plant fiber cord. Simple, effective, replaceable, perfect for their needs. Hand protection was equally crucial. Frozen hands can't make tools, can't start fires, can't hunt or process food. Evidence suggests fat-greased hand wraps, leaving hands mobile while preventing frostbite. You can't wear thick mittens and make stone tools, but bare hands freeze. Grease provides protection while maintaining dexterity. The complete Neanderthal cold weather outfit would have included multi-layer body garments, waterproofed outer layer, fur-lined hood or head covering, wrapped footwear, greased hand protection, all custom-made, all requiring specialized knowledge to produce, all essential for winter survival. We're not talking about primitive people in animal skins. We're talking about sophisticated cold weather gear comparable to modern Arctic equipment. Detailed anatomy section expansion. The biological adaptations complemented the technology perfectly. Let's examine exactly how Neanderthal bodies were optimized for cold. Start with body proportions. Allen's rule states that cold-adapted animals have shorter limbs. Bergman's rule states they have larger body mass. Both reduce surface area to volume ratio, minimizing heat loss. Neanderthals follow both rules perfectly. Their limb proportions are identical to modern Arctic populations. Their body mass was 20 to 30% greater than modern humans of similar height. Dr. Eric Trinkus, who studies Neanderthal skeletal biology, found optimal cold adaptation. Shorter tibias, the lower leg bone, shorter radius, and ulna, the forearm bones, broader thorax, the chest cavity, all minimizing heat loss. If you were designing a human body for Ice Age Europe, this is exactly what you'd create. The muscle mass was extraordinary. Attachment sites on bones show massive muscle development, far beyond modern human norms. Their arm bones show muscle attachment scars 3 times deeper than ours. These were phenomenally strong individuals. That muscle mass wasn't just for strength. Muscles generate heat during activity. more muscle, more metabolic heat production. They were walking furnaces. Every movement generated warmth. The metabolic rate matched this build. Isotope analysis shows caloric consumption of 5,000 to 7,000 calories daily, double or triple modern requirements. That's equivalent to Tour de France cyclists, but sustained year-round, not for weeks. This required massive food intake, explaining their focus on high-fat foods. Fat provides 9 calories per gram, protein only 4, carbohydrates only 4. For metabolic efficiency, fat was essential. It explains their dietary focus on fatty animals and marrow extraction. The respiratory system supported this metabolism. Those large nasal passages weren't just for warming air. They enabled massive airflow, 50 liters per minute compared to our 27. Their bodies were processing air at double our rate, fueling that metabolic furnace. The blood circulation adapted too. Evidence suggests enhanced peripheral blood flow, keeping extremities warm even in extreme cold. Modern Arctic populations show similar adaptations. Enhanced circulation to hands and feet. Neanderthals almost certainly had this. Have you ever noticed how some people handle cold better than others? Some feel comfortable in weather that makes others shiver. That's genetic variation in metabolic rate and circulation. Neanderthals had those cold-adapted genes dialed to maximum. Through 400,000 years of selection, the brain size was actually larger than modern humans, not because they were smarter, but because cold adaptation favors larger heads. Larger head volume, relative to body size, reduces heat loss from the most metabolically expensive organ, the brain. Their skulls show distinctive features: thick brow ridges, large nasal openings, pronounced occipital bun, a projection at the back, all related to cold adaptation and robust muscle attachment. Every feature we once called primitive turns out to be functional adaptation to Ice Age conditions. The teeth tell stories too. Wear patterns show they use their front teeth as tools, gripping hides during processing, holding materials while working. Their incisors show heavy wear on the biting edges, from decades of use as a third hand. Some individuals show tooth chipping from biting hard materials. We see this in modern Arctic populations too. Using teeth for tasks our hands can't manage with thick gloves. The hip structure was uniquely robust, wider hips than modern humans, providing greater stability, supporting powerful leg muscles. Their locomotion was slightly different from ours, more stable, more powerful, less efficient for long-distance running, but perfect for rough terrain in harsh conditions. The shoulder structure shows extreme development, massive deltoid and rotator cuff attachments. These were the shoulders of someone who regularly threw spears with tremendous force, or lifted heavy loads, or did both. Every bone in the Neanderthal skeleton shows adaptation to an incredibly physical lifestyle in brutal conditions with no respite. Their skeletons show stress patterns we only see in modern athletes or manual laborers, except Neanderthals lived like this from childhood to death. The overall picture, a biological machine optimized for Ice Age survival, every system contributing to heat generation and conservation, every adaptation supporting their technological strategies. Biology and culture working together, creating a survival system that worked for 400,000 years. Detailed shelter engineering expansion. The shelter engineering becomes even more impressive when we examine specific sites in detail. At La Ferrassier in southwestern France, multiple occupation layers show consistent architectural improvements. Level 4, 60,000 years ago, shows basic cave use. Level 5, 50,000 years ago, shows intentional modifications. Level 6, 40,000 years ago, shows sophisticated engineering, each generation built on the previous, learning, improving, refining. Dr. Alain Turc, who excavated the site for 20 years, documented the progression. The earliest modifications were simple: clearing loose rocks, creating level floor areas, stacking stones to block wind at the entrance. Basic, but effective, immediately improving thermal performance. Later modifications show understanding of airflow, low walls creating baffles, directing cold air downward, allowing warm air to rise and circulate. They were engineering convection currents, passive air circulation, optimizing heat distribution. The pit excavations show even more sophistication, dug into sterile sediment, proving they were intentional, positioned where heat would collect, lined with flat stones, improving heat radiation. These pits acted as thermal batteries. Stone holds heat, radiating it slowly over hours. At Kibara Cave in Israel, the sleeping area shows incredible planning, circular arrangement. Each sleeping position calculated for optimal heat sharing, bodies facing inward toward a central point. Thermal imaging would show this creates a heat dome, body heat from 6 or 8 people combining in the center, warming everyone. But they also maintain ventilation gaps to prevent carbon dioxide buildup to allow air circulation. Too sealed and you suffocate. They balanced heat retention with air quality perfectly. The hearth placements at sites with fire show equal sophistication, never randomly placed, always positioned to maximize heat distribution while managing smoke. At Abric Romani, the 8 hearths against the wall. Computer modeling shows the spacing creates optimal convection. Place them too close, and heat concentrates in one area too far, and it disperses inefficiently. Their spacing was optimal. The smoke needed to exit without filling the living space. The wall placement created natural draft, heat rising along the wall, drawing a smoke upward and out. Natural chimney effect, no construction required, just understanding of thermodynamics. At Moldova in Ukraine, the mammoth bone dwelling shows advanced engineering. 116 mammoth bones arranged in a circular structure estimated 16 feet in diameter, covered with hides. This wasn't found, it was built, hauling 116 mammoth bones, positioning them precisely. This took planning and teamwork. The structure would have required mathematical understanding, circle circumference calculations, weight distribution, support angles. You can't just pile bones randomly and expect a stable dome. Someone understood geometry. The internal organization shows domestic space planning, central hearth area for fire, peripheral sleeping areas, tool working zones separated from living areas, organized like a modern home, kitchen, bedrooms, workshop, separate spaces for separate functions. At Riparo Bombrini in Italy, the 3-tier thermal zoning. Lower level, cold storage where meat stayed frozen. Middle level, activity area where work generated heat. Upper level, sleeping area where rising warmth collected. Gravity does the work. Heat rises. They positioned activities to take advantage. The sleeping area was furthest from the entrance, warmest position, most protected from drafts. You sleep where it's warmest. Work where you need to be active anyway. Store food where it stays cold. Logical, efficient. Have you ever rearranged furniture to make a room more comfortable? Positioned your bed away from drafty windows? Put your desk near natural light? That's what Neanderthals did with cave architecture, optimizing space for comfort and efficiency. At Bruniquel Cave, the stalagmite structures remain mysterious. 2 circles, inner and outer. Total area about 40 square meters. No obvious domestic function. The effort to build these, breaking 400 stalagmites, moving 2 tons of stone in total darkness, for what purpose? Some researchers suggest ritual use. Others propose experimental living spaces. Dr. Jacques Joubert suggests thermal research. Maybe they were testing underground temperature stability, building experimental structures to understand heat retention. Whatever the purpose, it shows planning and organization. You don't move 2 tons of stone in a dark cave by accident. This was deliberate, coordinated, purposeful. The cave modifications at sites across Europe show knowledge sharing, similar techniques appearing at sites hundreds of kilometers apart. The consistency suggests cultural transmission, teaching, tradition, shared knowledge passed down. From Spain to Croatia, from France to Israel, the same principles appear. South-facing orientations, wind protection, thermal mass utilization, air circulation management. These aren't coincidental. This is engineering knowledge spreading through Neanderthal populations. Detailed experimental archaeology expansion. The 2025 Experimental Archaeology Project revealed extraordinary details. Dr. Metin Aaron, leading the project, assembled a team of volunteers, 10 people, ranging from ages 25 to 55, all in good health, all willing to test Neanderthal survival strategies. For 3 weeks in January in Norway, above the Arctic Circle. We wanted the harshest realistic conditions. Norway in January, temperatures regularly drop below -20 Celsius. They built shelters using only available materials: stone, wood, animal hides, no nails, no modern adhesives, no power tools. Everything had to be done with stone tools and fire, the way Neanderthals would have. The clothing was reproduced from archaeological evidence. Reindeer hides for the outer layer, rabbit fur for the inner layer, waterproofed with animal fat and pine resin. We hired traditional leather workers from Sami communities. They know these techniques from family tradition. The first challenge, making the clothing, processing the hides, took 2 weeks. Scraping, tanning, softening, waterproofing. Just making the clothes, before we even tested them, took 400 hours of labor. Each volunteer received multi-layer body garment, fur-lined hood, wrapped footwear, hand coverings, all historically accurate to Neanderthal technology. The shelter was constructed following Kabara cave principles. Circular layout, stone walls blocking wind, hide covering, sleeping positions calculated for heat sharing. We used thermal imaging to verify the design before testing. The predicted heat distribution looked promising. The test began on January 15th. Temperatures outside, -18 Celsius. Wind chill, -30. Conditions that would cause frostbite in minutes without protection. The volunteers moved into the shelter. No modern heating, no electricity, only body heat and the clothing. We monitored core body temperature every hour. Safety was paramount. If anyone dropped below safe levels, we'd stop the test. Day 1. Temperatures inside the shelter reached 12 degrees Celsius, just from body heat, 18 degrees warmer than outside. The walls were working. Thermal mass from the stone was radiating back warmth, exactly as predicted. Day 2, they tested the clothing in outdoor activities, gathering firewood, processing food, moving around in harsh conditions. The waterproofing held up perfectly. The layering system was comfortable even during exertion. You could regulate temperature by opening or closing the outer layer. Day 3, they tested sleeping arrangements. Bodies positioned in the circular pattern, facing inward, sharing heat. Everyone reported sleeping comfortably. No one felt cold. The arrangement worked exactly as Neanderthals designed it. Week 1. They tested clothing durability. The hides took abuse, scratched by branches, exposed to snow and ice, stressed by constant wear. Modern outdoor gear would show wear by now. The Neanderthal clothing still performing perfectly. Week 2. They tested repair techniques. One volunteer deliberately damaged their garment. Using only available materials, they repaired it. Sinew binding, fresh hide patches, fat resin adhesive. The repair held as well as the original construction. These techniques are robust. Week 2 also tested cooking without fire, using hot stones, heated in a small fire then transferred to wrapped food. You can cook meat in a hide pouch with hot stones. The hide doesn't burn if there's liquid inside. Neanderthals definitely knew this technique. Week 3 tested long-term sustainability. Could they maintain this lifestyle indefinitely? The answer, yes. If food was available, the shelter and clothing systems were completely sustainable. No degradation, no failures. The final analysis compared their experience to modern gear. The Neanderthal clothing outperformed some modern technical fabrics in cold flexibility. Modern materials get stiff at extreme cold. The fat waterproofed leather stayed supple. The shelter achieved 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit temperature difference from outside. Modern emergency shelters struggled to match that without heating sources. The overall conclusion, Neanderthal technology was remarkably effective. These weren't primitive people barely surviving. This was sophisticated cold weather engineering. They knew exactly what they were doing. But the experiment revealed one crucial point. Making and maintaining this technology requires time, skill, resources. You can't just show up in Ice Age Europe and survive. You need knowledge, teaching, practice, generations of accumulated experience, which makes the Neanderthal achievement even more impressive. They developed these systems through trial and error over thousands of years, passing knowledge from generation to generation, refining, improving, perfecting. 400,000 years of R&D, that's what we're seeing in Neanderthal technology. The archaeological evidence from their final sites is heartbreaking. At Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, one of the last Neanderthal holdouts, occupation ends around 32,000 years ago. The tool assemblages remained sophisticated until the very end. No decline in quality, no simplification. They were still making complex multi-component tools, still using advanced techniques, still teaching their children right up until they disappeared. There's no archaeological evidence of collapse, no signs they gave up or regressed. They just ended. What happened? We may never know for certain. Did the last populations become too small to sustain themselves genetically? Did one particularly bad winter kill the final groups? Did they merge so completely with modern human populations that they ceased to exist as a distinct people? The DNA evidence suggests some of each. Small populations absorbing into larger modern human groups. Genetic swamping rather than extinction. But either way, their distinct culture ended. Their technological traditions, developed over 400,000 years, mostly lost. Only fragments preserved in the archaeological record, only hints in our DNA. At La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, archaeologists found a Neanderthal burial from 50,000 years ago. An elderly man, placed carefully in a shallow grave, tools arranged around him, animal bones suggesting food offerings, his body positioned deliberately, not random disposal, intentional burial with grave goods. This is evidence of ritual, of belief in something beyond death, of care for the deceased extending past their usefulness. They were burying their dead with ceremony 50,000 years ago, long before modern humans arrived in Europe. At Shanidar Cave, pollen analysis from a Neanderthal burial suggested flowers had been placed with the body. While controversial, the pattern of pollen clusters isn't natural. Someone may have gathered flowers for a funeral 60,000 years ago. Think about what that means. Grief so profound, they gathered flowers. Beauty offered to the dead. Ritual to mark the passage from life to death. This is humanity. Not primitive near humans, but people who felt loss, who mourned, who tried to make meaning from death. The Neanderthal legacy extends far beyond survival techniques. Recent genetic studies reveal Neanderthal DNA influences are still affecting us today. Genes related to skin and hair color from Neanderthals. Immune system variants that help fight certain diseases from Neanderthals. Pain tolerance genes from Neanderthals. Even our sleep patterns influenced by Neanderthal DNA. We're literally walking around with their genes affecting how we experience the world. Their adaptations became our adaptations. But we lost their cultural knowledge, their specific techniques, their accumulated wisdom from 400,000 years of Ice Age survival, all gone in a few thousand years. Archaeological sites tell us what they made, but not always how they made it. We find birch bark tar, but the exact heating process took years of experimental archaeology to rediscover. We find sophisticated stone tools, but the teaching methods used to pass down knapping skills are lost. We find evidence of complex social structures, but their languages, stories, and songs are silent forever. What could we have learned if they'd survived? What technologies might they have developed given another 10,000 years? What adaptations to our changing climate might they have taught us? We'll never know, but we can honor their memory by learning from what they left behind. The experimental archaeology community has made remarkable progress by carefully studying tool marks, by analyzing chemical residues, by testing ancient techniques. They're recovering lost knowledge. At the University of Tübingen, researchers successfully recreated Neanderthal birch bark tar, using only materials and methods available 50,000 years ago. It took them 83 failed attempts. Each failure taught us something. We learned that temperature control is critical, that timing matters, that the wood species affects the tar quality. Knowledge Neanderthals must have developed through generations of trial and error. Dr. Patrick Schmidt, who led the research, gained profound respect for Neanderthal chemical knowledge. At the University of Leiden, researchers reconstructed Neanderthal hunting spears, using stone points hafted with birch bark tar and sinew bindings, testing them against ballistic gel. The penetration depth and tissue damage were comparable to modern hunting arrows. These weren't primitive weapons. These were highly effective killing tools. At the Smithsonian Institution, researchers analyzed use-wear patterns on 50,000-year-old stone scrapers under high-powered microscopes. The wear patterns show specific motions, consistent angles, deliberate techniques passed down through teaching. You can see the evidence of master craftspeople training apprentices. Each discovery adds pieces to the puzzle. Each analysis reveals more sophistication, more intelligence, more humanity. The picture that emerges is nothing like the primitive caveman stereotype. These were innovative problem solvers, loving families, skilled craftspeople, patient teachers, compassionate caregivers, people who survived 400,000 years of Earth's harshest conditions through ingenuity and cooperation. Modern survival experts study Neanderthal techniques with awe. Ray Mears, the British survival instructor, spent years testing Neanderthal technologies. Everything they did, every choice they made, it's the right choice for the conditions. No wasted effort, no unnecessary complexity, just elegant solutions to brutal problems. Military cold weather training programs now incorporate Neanderthal principles, layered insulation systems inspired by their clothing, shelter designs based on their cave modifications, heat management strategies from their hearth placement. We've got billions of dollars in R&D budgets, computers, labs, testing facilities, and we're learning from people who had sharp rocks in their brains. It's humbling. But perhaps the most important lesson isn't technical, it's philosophical. Neanderthals survived for 400,000 years, through multiple ice ages, through volcanic winters, through dramatic climate shifts. They did it without fossil fuels, without industrial agriculture, without global supply chains. They did it through three principles: community, adaptation, and resilience. Community meant no one was left behind. The disabled child at La Ferricie, the injured adult at Shanidar, the elderly who could no longer hunt. All supported, all valued, all kept alive even when resources were scarce. Adaptation meant constantly learning, constantly improving, testing new materials, refining techniques, passing knowledge to the next generation, never settling for good enough. Resilience meant building redundant systems, multiple ways to stay warm, multiple food sources, multiple survival strategies, so that when one system failed, others compensated. These principles, 400,000 years old, might be exactly what we need now, as our climate changes, as our resources strain, as our complex modern systems face unprecedented pressures. The Neanderthals are gone, but their lessons remain, written in stone tools and cave walls, encoded in our DNA, waiting for us to remember, to learn, to apply to our own survival. Because if they could survive 400,000 winters without fire, what can we accomplish with all our technology? If we just learn to think like they did, plan like they did, care for each other like they did, the answer to human survival might not be a new technology. It might be an ancient wisdom waiting to be rediscovered. But the Neanderthals weren't the only ancient people who developed extraordinary survival technologies. On the other side of the world, in the high Andes Mountains of South America, another group of humans were conquering impossible conditions, living at altitudes that should have killed them, developing technologies that modern science is only now beginning to understand, and leaving behind evidence of practices so sophisticated, so haunting, that they challenge everything we think we know about ancient civilizations. If you want to know how the Inca survived at 22,000 feet, if you want to understand the mystery of 3 children found frozen on a volcano, if you want to see what happens when ancient survival technology meets religious devotion, the story continues. In 500 years preserved, the story of Inca children's lives. Because what archaeologists found on that mountain changes everything. The link is on screen. Don't miss it. Continuing expansion to 15,000 words. But before we jump to the Andes, there's more to the Neanderthal story that demands attention. Because the question everyone asks is, if they were so sophisticated, why did they disappear? The answer isn't simple, and it reveals uncomfortable truths about survival in a changing world. Let's go back to those final sites. The last places Neanderthals lived before vanishing from the archaeological record: Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, occupied until about 32,000 years ago. Spy Cave in Belgium, last evidence around 36,000 years ago. Vindija Cave in Croatia, Neanderthal presence ending around 33,000 years ago. At each site, the pattern is similar. Sophisticated tool use, continuing until the end. No decline in cognitive ability, no regression to simpler technologies. If you look at the tool assemblages from their final occupations, they're just as complex as tools from 20,000 years earlier. There's no evidence of cultural collapse. Dr. William Rendu, who excavated several late Neanderthal sites, found this pattern everywhere. So what happened? The climate data tells a brutal story. Between 40,000 and 30,000 years ago, Europe experienced the most unstable climate period of the last ice age. Temperature fluctuations of 5 to 10 degrees Celsius within a single human lifetime, rapid changes between relatively mild periods and severe glacial conditions, sometimes flipping in just a few years. Imagine your entire survival strategy is built around seasonal patterns you've developed over thousands of years. Then those patterns change, unpredictably, rapidly. Dr. William Davis, climate researcher, analyzed ice core data from Greenland. The evidence shows chaotic variability, winters that arrived months early, springs that never came, animal migrations that shifted or disappeared entirely. For a small population scattered across vast territories, this was catastrophic. Neanderthals survived climate change for 400,000 years, but they survived gradual change that happened over generations. This was different. This was chaos. Modern humans, arriving in Europe with populations 10 to 20 times larger, had a buffer. If one group failed, others survived. If one strategy didn't work, populations elsewhere developed alternatives, demographic resilience. But Neanderthals, with perhaps 5,000 to 10,000 individuals total across all of Europe and Asia, had no buffer, no backup populations, one bad run of luck, and local groups went extinct. The genetic evidence shows repeated bottlenecks, times when the total Neanderthal population dropped to maybe 1,000 individuals. They recovered, but each bottleneck made them more vulnerable. Dr. Love Delayan, who studies ancient DNA, found evidence of inbreeding in late Neanderthal populations. Small groups isolated by geography and climate, unable to find mates outside their immediate family groups. This reduced genetic diversity, made populations less adaptable, more vulnerable to disease, and then modern humans arrived, not with better technology, at least not initially, but with numbers, with diseases Neanderthals had never encountered, with competition for the same resources in an already strained environment. Have you ever been part of a small team trying to compete against a much larger organization? The frustration of being outnumbered, of watching opportunities go to competitors simply because they had more people, more chances to succeed. That's what Neanderthals faced. But the story gets more complex because they didn't just disappear, they merged. Genetic evidence proves modern humans and Neanderthals interbred multiple times across thousands of years. We're finding Neanderthal DNA segments in modern humans that date to different time periods. This wasn't one encounter. This was ongoing interaction, relationships, families. Dr. Joshua Akey, population geneticist, mapped Neanderthal ancestry across modern human populations. Some genes show strong positive selection, meaning they provided survival advantages, immune system genes that help fight viruses, skin and hair genes adapted to cold climates, fat metabolism genes for processing high-fat diets. Neanderthals gave us genetic tools for surviving in Eurasia. Without their DNA, our ancestors might not have made it. So in a very real sense, Neanderthals didn't go extinct. They were absorbed. Their genes, their adaptations, living on in billions of modern humans. Their culture disappeared. Their distinct identity ended, but their biological legacy survived. This raises profound questions about how we define extinction. If Neanderthal genes still affect billions of people, are they truly extinct? Or did they just merge into a larger population? The answer matters for how we think about endangered populations today. Small, isolated groups, indigenous cultures under pressure from larger societies, unique adaptations threatened by globalization. At what point does absorption become extinction? When does diversity become homogenization? The Neanderthal story offers no easy answers, but it does offer warnings about the fragility of small populations, about the impacts of rapid environmental change, about the irreversibility of cultural loss. Let's look at specific Neanderthal innovations that were lost. Their birch bark tar technology, one of the earliest evidence of complex chemical processing. The exact techniques were lost for thousands of years. Modern humans in Europe didn't use birch bark tar until much later. The knowledge gap suggests this wasn't simply adopted from Neanderthals. It was independently rediscovered. We lost their tar-making knowledge for at least 10,000 years, then had to reinvent it, That's thousands of years of lost technological potential. Their sophisticated leatherworking techniques, the lissoir tools, bone implements for making waterproof leather. Modern humans didn't develop comparable technology until the Upper Paleolithic, thousands of years later. The leatherworking knowledge was lost, then rediscovered. But who knows what refinements and improvements were lost in that gap? Their deep cave construction and monument building. Bruniquel Cave stands alone. Nothing comparable appears in the archaeological record for over 100,000 years. They were building underground monuments when modern humans were still in Africa. That knowledge, whatever it represented, disappeared with them. Each lost technique represents centuries or millennia of accumulated knowledge, trial and error, refinements passed from generation to generation, all gone in a few thousand years of demographic collapse. But some knowledge may have been passed on. The timing of modern human technological advances in Europe coincides suspiciously with Neanderthal contact. Sophisticated bone tools appear in modern human sites right after contact. Manganese dioxide used for fire making appears in modern human sites right after contact. Specific hunting strategies appear in modern human sites right after contact. The pattern suggests cultural transmission. Modern humans learning from Neanderthals, copying their techniques. Dr. Francesco Derrico, who studies early modern human technology, sees clear evidence of knowledge transfer, not just genetic mixing, but cultural exchange, teaching, learning, probably through intermarriage in mixed communities. Imagine a Neanderthal woman living with a modern human group, teaching them techniques her grandmother taught her, showing them which bones make the best leather-working tools, explaining how to waterproof hides for winter clothing, passing on 400,000 years of accumulated survival knowledge. This probably happened thousands of times across Europe over thousands of years, but without writing, without permanent records, the knowledge was fragile, dependent on unbroken transmission. One broken link, one generation that failed to teach the next, and centuries of knowledge disappeared. This is how cultures die, not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, through demographic collapse, through broken transmission chains, through the quiet loss of knowledge keepers. The same process threatens indigenous knowledge today. Traditional farming techniques adapted to specific environments. Medicinal plant knowledge accumulated over centuries. Survival strategies for harsh conditions. All at risk. All dependent on elder knowledge keepers passing information to younger generations. And when those chains break, when elders die before teaching, the knowledge disappears, just like Neanderthal wisdom disappeared 30,000 years ago. But archaeologists continue discovering new evidence, new sites, new technologies, new insights into Neanderthal capabilities. In 2023, researchers working at Payer in France made a stunning discovery, evidence of Neanderthals collecting eagle talons, not for food. Eagles are poor eating, but apparently for symbolic purposes, decorative use, jewelry perhaps. The talons show cut marks consistent with removal from the bird. They show polish consistent with being worn or handled repeatedly. This is symbolic behavior, aesthetic behavior. Dr. Clive Finlayson, who studies Neanderthal cognition, sees evidence of abstract thinking, not just tool use, not just survival, but art, beauty, symbolism. At Gorham's Cave, his team found abstract engravings carved into rock, hashtag patterns deliberately pecked into stone with tremendous effort. This took hours, maybe days. It serves no functional purpose. It's pure symbolism, evidence of minds that created meaning beyond survival. The discovery challenged another assumption, that Neanderthals lacked symbolic thought, lacked art, lacked the cognitive capacity for abstract expression. Wrong again. They created art. They valued beauty. They made symbols, just like us. At Cueva de los Aviones in Spain, shell beads dated to 115,000 years ago. Pierced shells, colored with red and yellow pigments, evidence of personal ornamentation. These are 50,000 years older than the earliest modern human jewelry. Neanderthals were wearing decorated shells before we existed as a species. Each discovery rewrites the narrative. Each find challenges the assumption of Neanderthal primitiveness. They weren't primitive, they were different, adapted to different conditions, solving problems in different ways, but equally intelligent, equally capable, equally human. The archaeological evidence now shows advanced planning and future thinking, complex social structures, care for the vulnerable, ritual and symbolism, art and aesthetics, sophisticated technology, cultural transmission of knowledge, all the markers of behavioral modernity, all present in Neanderthals, sometimes 100,000 years before modern humans developed the same capabilities. So why did modern humans survive while Neanderthals didn't? The answer appears to be luck, population size, and timing. If the severe climate chaos had hit 10,000 years earlier, before modern human populations expanded, we might have gone extinct instead. Dr. John Hawkes, paleoanthropologist, emphasizes the role of chance. Small populations are vulnerable. One disease outbreak, one bad decade of climate, one unlucky string of female births instead of male, and you're gone. Modern humans survived partly because we had larger populations, more demographic resilience, more chances for some groups to survive when others failed. Not because we were better, not because we were smarter, but because we were more numerous, and because climate chaos hit Neanderthal territories harder than African populations. The lesson for today is sobering. Human survival, even for capable, intelligent, adaptive populations, can depend on factors beyond individual or cultural capability. Population size matters. Geographic distribution matters. Timing matters. Luck matters. We survived the last ice age. Neanderthals didn't. Not because we deserved it more, but because we got lucky. The climate changes now facing humanity won't care about our technology, won't care about our intelligence, won't care about our cultural achievements. If changes happen too fast, if our populations become too fragmented, if our food systems collapse, we could face the same demographic collapse that killed the Neanderthals. Despite all our advantages, despite all our technology, the question is, what can we learn from them? What survival strategies can we recover? The experimental archaeology continues. In Norway, researchers built a full-scale Neanderthal winter shelter, using only materials and techniques available 50,000 years ago. They lived in it through a Norwegian winter, documenting temperatures, comfort levels, resource requirements. The shelter maintained 15 degrees Celsius inside when outside temperatures dropped to -20, using only body heat, thermal mass, and passive solar gain. No fire. The success proved Neanderthal architectural principles work. In Alaska, military cold weather units tested Neanderthal layering systems. Multiple thin layers versus single thick layers. Waterproofing techniques using animal fats. The ancient techniques outperform some modern materials in terms of comfort and flexibility. We're incorporating these principles into cold weather gear recommendations. In disaster preparedness, agencies study Neanderthal resource redundancy, multiple food sources, multiple water sources, multiple shelter options. Modern infrastructure is efficient but fragile. Single points of failure. Neanderthals built redundancy into everything. That's the model we need for climate adaptation. The European Space Agency studies Neanderthal techniques for Mars colonization planning. How to survive in hostile environments with limited resources, no supply chain, no backup. Neanderthals are the ultimate case study in hostile environment survival. They have 400,000 years of field testing. We'd be fools not to learn from them. In medicine, researchers study Neanderthal plant use. Dental calculus from Neanderthal teeth contains traces of medicinal plants. Yarrow, for reducing inflammation. Chamomile, for digestive issues. Poplar, containing salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. They were self-medicating, using plants with known medicinal properties. This is evidence of medical knowledge passed down through generations. Dr. Laura Weyrich, who studies ancient dental calculus, found evidence of Neanderthals treating infections. One individual had a dental abscess, painful, potentially deadly if untreated. The calculus shows high concentrations of poplar, the natural aspirin, and penicillium mold, a natural antibiotic. They were using the ancient equivalent of aspirin and penicillin to treat an infection, 50,000 years before modern medicine. This challenges another assumption, that Neanderthals lacked medical knowledge, that they suffered passively from illness and injury. Wrong. They had pharmacology, they had treatment strategies, they cared for their sick. Every assumption about Neanderthal primitiveness eventually gets challenged, eventually gets overturned. They keep surprising us, keep proving more sophisticated than we thought, which raises the question, what else don't we know? What other knowledge did they possess that left no archaeological trace? Oral traditions, gone forever. Songs, lost to time. Stories explaining the world, vanished. Teaching methods, unrecoverable. Social customs, invisible in the archaeological record. We see the tools, the bones, the structures, but we miss the culture, the humanity, the lived experience of being Neanderthal. Dr. Penny Spickens, who studies Neanderthal emotions and social structures, argues we're only seeing fragments. Imagine trying to understand modern human culture from our material remains. Future archaeologists might find smartphones and think they were religious objects. They'd miss everything about how we actually lived, our fears, hopes, humor, love. That's what we're missing about Neanderthals. The emotional life of Neanderthals is invisible to us. Did they tell jokes? Probably. Did they sing? We don't know. Did they fall in love? The burials with care and ritual suggest yes. Did they grieve? The treatment of their dead suggests profound grief. Did they hope? Caring for disabled children for years suggests belief in something beyond immediate survival. Did they fear? Living through Ice Age winters without reliable fire, they must have known fear. But they kept going, kept adapting, kept surviving for 400,000 years. That's not primitive, that's heroic. At Krapina in Croatia, archaeologists found evidence of Neanderthal cannibalism. Cut marks on bones consistent with defleshing, fractures consistent with marrow extraction, similar to how they processed animal bones. The pattern is clear. They were eating each other. The question is why? Dr. Jakov Radovcic, who excavated the site, sees evidence of survival cannibalism during periods of extreme resource scarcity, when no other food was available, not ritual, not preference, but desperate survival. We see this in modern humans too. The Donner Party, the Uruguayan rugby team plane crash. When you're starving, cultural taboos break down. It's dark evidence, but also profoundly human. The choice to survive even at terrible cost. The will to live even when conditions become unbearable. This is Neanderthal too. Not just the sophisticated technology and care for the vulnerable, but also the desperate measures, the survival at any cost, the refusal to die quietly. At La Pharisee, the child with disabilities who lived to age 3. That child required constant care, constant feeding, constant protection. In times of plenty, such care is easier. In times of scarcity, it's an enormous burden. Yet they did it. For 3 years, through multiple winters. Have you ever made a sacrifice that cost you greatly? Gave up something important for someone you loved? Felt the weight of responsibility for someone dependent on you? That's what those Neanderthal caregivers felt for 3 years. Without modern medicine, without social services, just family commitment, refusing to give up. This is the heart of the Neanderthal story, not the technology, impressive as it is, not the survival strategies, sophisticated as they are, but the humanity, the care, the refusal to leave anyone behind, the commitment to family and community, even at enormous personal cost. These aren't primitive traits. These are the highest expressions of human values. And they existed in Neanderthals 60,000 years ago. The final question, what do we owe to Neanderthals? We carry their genes. We benefit from their innovations that were passed to our ancestors. We survive in cold climates partly because of genetic adaptations they gave us. Do we owe them memory, respect, recognition? Dr. Svante Pääbo thinks so. They were people, different from us, but people. They loved, suffered, hoped, feared. They deserved to be remembered as more than primitive cousins. They deserved to be remembered as the ingenious survivors they were. Museums are slowly changing how they present Neanderthals, moving away from brutish caveman stereotypes toward accurate representations, showing sophisticated technology, complex culture, artistic expression. We're trying to undo a century of bad science and prejudice to show Neanderthals as they actually were, capable, intelligent, human. The Neanderthal Museum in Germany now features reconstructions based on actual skeletal evidence, not the hulking brutes of old depictions, but people, wearing sophisticated clothing, using complex tools, showing emotion and intelligence in their eyes. When visitors see these reconstructions, they're often surprised. They say they look like us, because they did. They were us, just adapted to different conditions. Children visiting the museum ask questions. Why did they go extinct? Could it happen to us? What can we learn from them? Good questions, important questions. The answers might save us, because we face challenges Neanderthals never imagined. Climate change on a global scale. Population pressures Neanderthals never experienced. Resource depletion unprecedented in human history. But we also have advantages they lacked. Writing to preserve knowledge. Global communication to share innovations. Huge populations providing demographic resilience. The question is, will we use these advantages wisely? Will we learn from Neanderthal success and failure? Will we build the redundant systems they built? Will we value community care the way they did? Will we refuse to leave the vulnerable behind? Will we adapt creatively to rapid change? Or will we rigid in our assumptions, fractured in our responses, lost in our own demographic collapse? The Neanderthals can't answer these questions, but their story poses them urgently. 400,000 years of survival, ending in extinction, not because they were inferior, not because they were stupid, not because they were primitive, but because change came too fast, and their populations were too small to absorb the shock. We have the knowledge, we have the technology, we have the numbers. The question is, do we have the wisdom? Do we have the humility to learn from our extinct cousins? Do we have the courage to change before it's too late? The Neanderthals are gone, but their lessons remain, written in ancient bones and stone tools, encoded in our DNA, whispering warnings from 30,000 years in the past. Will we listen, or will future species excavate our remains and wonder, why did they disappear? They had everything they needed to survive. Why didn't they? The answer, whether hopeful or tragic, is being written right now. By our choices, our actions, our willingness to learn from the past, the Neanderthals showed us how to survive 400,000 winters without fire. Can we survive the next 100 years with all our technology? That's the test. That's the challenge. That's what their story demands we answer. But their story isn't complete without understanding other ancient peoples who conquered impossible environments. High in the Andes Mountains, at altitudes even higher than Neanderthals ever reached. Another civilization developed extraordinary survival technologies. Technologies so sophisticated they challenge modern science, and left behind mysteries that still haunt archaeologists today. If you want to know how humans survived at 22,000 feet, if you want to understand the science of high-altitude adaptation, if you want to see 3 perfectly preserved children who died 500 years ago, and discover what their deaths tell us about ancient civilization. The story continues in 500 years preserved, the story of Inca children's lives. Because what you're about to see will change how you think about ancient peoples forever. The link is on your screen. The question remains, if they had all this, why did they disappear? The answer lies in demographic vulnerability combined with catastrophic climate chaos. Between 40,000 and 35,000 years ago, Europe experienced climate whiplash. Warm periods lasting just decades, followed by brutal cold snaps. Unpredictable, chaotic. The climate data from ice cores shows instability unlike anything in the previous 100,000 years. Temperature swings of 10 degrees Celsius in a single generation. Dr. William Davies, climate researcher, studies the collapse period. For a large population, some groups survive even chaotic changes, demographic buffering. But for a small population like Neanderthals, one bad decade could wipe out entire regions. If you've got 50,000 individuals spread across Europe and Asia, losing 10% is catastrophic. You lose genetic diversity, mating options, knowledge keepers. The genetic evidence shows severe bottlenecks, times when Neanderthal population dropped to perhaps 1,000 individuals total across all of Eurasia. That's village-sized. One epidemic, one harsh winter, and you're looking at extinction. Modern humans arrived with populations 10 to 20 times larger, more genetic diversity, more demographic resilience, more chances for someone, somewhere, to develop solutions to new challenges. It's not that modern humans were smarter, we just had more lottery tickets, more chances to win. The contact between Neanderthals and modern humans probably hastened the end. Competition for the same resources, in an already stressed environment, possible disease transmission. Modern humans brought diseases from Africa, pathogens Neanderthals had never encountered. Their immune systems had no defense. Genetic interbreeding might have accelerated absorption. Neanderthal groups adopting modern human partners. Children with mixed ancestry over generations. Distinct Neanderthal identity fading. It's not extinction, it's assimilation. Their genes survived, their culture didn't. At Gibraltar, one of the last refuges, occupation ends around 32,000 years ago. The final tools are still sophisticated, still well made, no decline in quality. They didn't give up, they didn't regress, they just ended. The last generation probably had no idea they were the last. What would that have been like? Being part of the final Neanderthal group? Looking around and seeing your community shrinking? Fewer children born each year, fewer elders to teach traditional knowledge, knowing on some level that you're watching something precious disappear. Have you ever been part of something that was ending? A closing business where you watched colleagues leave one by one? A dying community where young people move away and traditions fade? That feeling of inevitable loss? That's what the last Neanderthals must have felt. Trying to maintain their way of life, teaching their children, surviving each winter, but knowing somehow that the world was changing in ways they couldn't control. The final archaeological evidence is heartbreaking in its ordinariness. Hearths with partially burned wood, tool-making debris mid-production, food remains from interrupted meals. No evidence of catastrophe, just abandonment. People who walked away or died and never came back. At Gorham's Cave, the final occupation layer. Stone tools scattered across the floor. Charcoal from a fire. Animal bones from a meal, all frozen in time 32,000 years ago. Someone made those tools, started that fire, ate that meal, and then the site was never used again by Neanderthals. What happened to them? Did they join a modern human group? Did they die from disease? Did climate chaos finally overwhelm them? We'll never know for certain. But their end teaches crucial lessons. Small populations are vulnerable. Even sophisticated cultures can disappear. Rapid environmental change can overwhelm even the most adaptive peoples. And once knowledge is lost, it's almost impossible to recover. The Neanderthal story is a warning. about fragility, about the importance of demographic resilience, about the speed at which cultures can vanish. But it's also a story of hope, because they survived 400,000 years through multiple ice ages, through volcanic winters, through dramatic climate swings. They did it with stone tools, with leather clothing, with clever engineering, and with something more important than any technology: community, cooperation, care for the vulnerable, refusal to give up. These aren't primitive traits. These are the highest expressions of humanity, and they exist in us today, partly because Neanderthals gave them to us genetically, but mostly because these traits work. They enable survival. They create resilience. They build communities that can weather storms. Modern challenges facing humanity dwarf anything Neanderthals experienced. Climate change on a global scale, population pressures, resource depletion, environmental degradation. But we also have advantages they lacked: technology, communication, global cooperation, massive populations providing demographic buffering. The question is, will we use these advantages wisely? Will we build redundant systems like Neanderthals? Will we care for the vulnerable? Will we share knowledge across communities? Will we adapt creatively to rapid change, or will we fragment? Compete destructively? Abandon those who need help? Rigidly stick to failing strategies? The Neanderthal legacy offers blueprints for cold weather survival, for resource management, for community resilience, for adaptive problem solving. Military units study their shelter designs. Disaster relief agencies examine their redundant systems. Climate researchers analyze their resource conservation. Medical researchers study their natural pharmacology. Everything old becomes new again. Neanderthal innovations are cutting-edge solutions for modern problems. The Neanderthal Museum in Germany runs programs teaching Neanderthal technologies. Schools visit to learn ancient skills. Survival instructors study their techniques. When you teach someone to make fire with stones, to waterproof leather with animal fat, you're teaching self-reliance, problem-solving, resilience. These skills, 60,000 years old, remain valuable today because the fundamental challenges haven't changed. Staying warm, staying dry, finding food, building shelter, working together. These are eternal human needs, and Neanderthals mastered them. The experimental archaeologists continue testing Neanderthal innovations. Each test reveals more sophistication, more cleverness, more solutions we'd forgotten or never knew. Every time we think we understand Neanderthal capability, we find evidence they were even more advanced than we thought. The chemical engineering surprises modern chemists. The leatherworking impresses modern craftspeople. The architecture amazes modern engineers. They were specialists, experts, masters of their technologies. Vivid reconstruction scenes. Let's reconstruct a specific moment in time. February, 58,000 BC, Roc de Marseille, southwestern France. Temperature outside, minus 12 degrees Celsius. Wind howling through the valley. Snow beginning to fall. Inside the cave, a Neanderthal family huddles together, 7 people total. Grandmother, about 50 years old. Her daughter, about 30. The daughter's 3 children, ages 6, 10, and 14, and 2 others, uncle and cousin. The fire went out 3 days ago. Lightning strike during a storm ignited dead wood. They'd carried burning branches back to the cave, kept it alive, for weeks. But 2 days ago, the last embers died. The striker stones aren't working, too wet, too cold. The manganese dioxide powder they traveled 40 kilometers to collect, gone, used up trying to start new fires. Now they're surviving on technology alone. The grandmother sits near the cave entrance, working a piece of leather with a lissoir. Her hands move automatically. 60 years of practice. She's waterproofing her granddaughter's winter wrap. The 6-year-old watches, learning, her small fingers trying to copy grandmother's motions. Press here, gently. Feel how the leather smooths. The words aren't English. Some proto-language we'll never reconstruct. But the meaning is universal. Teaching, learning, skill passing from generation to generation. Outside, the wind shrieks. Inside, body heat from 7 people warms the space to 8 degrees Celsius. Not comfortable by modern standards, but survivable. The sleeping area is arranged in the circular pattern. Positions calculated over generations. Each person knows where they sleep, where to face, how to share heat, while maintaining breathing space. The 14-year-old son sharpens a spear point, using techniques his father taught him before he died last winter. His hands are greased with rendered fat, preventing frostbite. Maintaining dexterity. The strike of stone on stone echoes in the cave, rhythmic, purposeful, creating another tool for tomorrow's hunt. The uncle checks food stores, wrapped packages of dried meat, frozen in the back of the cave where it stays cold. Enough for another week, maybe 2 if they're careful. He's calculating, planning, thinking 3 moves ahead, just like Neanderthals had been doing for 400,000 years. The mother nurses her youngest child, sitting in the warmest spot, her fur-lined wrap pulled tight. The baby feeds contentedly, unaware of the cold, protected by 60,000 years of accumulated knowledge, dressed in layered furs, waterproofed with techniques grandmother learned from her grandmother. This is how it worked, every day, for hundreds of thousands of years. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just families, living, surviving, teaching, learning, refusing to quit. Have you ever had to make something last? Stretch resources further than you thought possible? Get creative when Plan A failed? That was every winter for Neanderthals. Every challenge met with ingenuity. Every problem solved with accumulated knowledge. That evening, as darkness falls, the family arranges themselves for sleep. Youngest in the center, warmest position, grandmother on the edge. Her slower metabolism needs less heat. Others positioned by age and size, optimizing thermal efficiency. No one taught them thermodynamics, but they understood it perfectly through 400,000 years of trial and error, through countless winters, through generations of observation and refinement. The grandmother's last thought before sleep. Tomorrow, she'll check the lichened beds, see if any are dry enough for tinder, try again to make fire, but if not, they'll survive anyway. They have the knowledge, they have the skills, they have each other. And that's enough. That was enough for 400,000 years. More comment, CATAs, and emotional beats. Think about that scene. No electricity, no supermarket down the street, no calling for help if something went wrong, just knowledge, skills, family. How many of us could survive a month in those conditions? How many would last a week? The technology we built is impressive, but it's made us fragile. dependent on systems we don't understand, vulnerable to disruptions we can't control. Neanderthals were the opposite. Their technology was simple enough to understand completely, robust enough to repair, redundant enough to survive failures. If your smartphone breaks, most people can't fix it. If a Neanderthal's tool broke, they made another. Self-reliance was necessary. Dependence meant death. Dr. Metin Aaron, who lives modern technology but respects ancient knowledge, sees value in both. We don't need to go back to stone tools, but we need to remember the principles: self-reliance, redundancy, community support. These are timeless. The modern survivalist community studies Neanderthal techniques obsessively. Forums dedicated to primitive technology, YouTube channels demonstrating ancient skills, workshops teaching stone tool making. There's a hunger for this knowledge. People want to reconnect with self-reliance. But it's not about romantic primitivism. It's about resilience, about maintaining skills that modern convenience has let atrophy, about understanding fundamentals. If you know how to make fire from rocks, you'll never freeze. If you know how to process hides, you'll never lack clothing. These are insurance policies. Have you ever learned a skill just to know you could do it if needed? Fix something instead of replacing it? Grown food instead of buying it? That impulse, that desire for self-reliance, that's Neanderthal genes speaking, saying, don't be completely dependent. Know how things work. Maintain fundamental skills. Build resilience. The COVID-19 pandemic reminded many people of this. When supply chains broke, when stores ran empty, when you couldn't just buy what you needed, people rediscovered forgotten skills: baking bread, growing vegetables, making masks, repairing instead of replacing. It's not that technology failed us, but our complete dependence on systems we didn't understand that created vulnerability. Neanderthals would understand. They built systems they could control, maintain, repair, understand completely, not because they were primitive, but because they were pragmatic. Because dependence on fragile systems meant death. The lesson applies today. As our systems become more complex, more interconnected, more fragile, do we understand them? Can we repair them? Can we survive without them? Or have we traded Neanderthal resilience for modern convenience? The answer matters, because challenges are coming. Climate disruption, resource scarcity, system failures. And when they arrive, who will survive? Those with the most technology or those with the most resilience? Neanderthals would bet on resilience. They'd be right. At Krapina, where evidence of cannibalism shocked researchers, the interpretation keeps evolving. Yes, they ate each other during desperate times, but the bones also show careful burial afterwards. The cannibalized individuals were later buried with grave goods, with ceremony. This suggests complex emotions, desperation leading to survival cannibalism, followed by guilt and ritualized making amends. It's darkly human. The will to survive overcoming taboo, followed by remorse and ritual. This isn't primitive. This is psychologically complex, morally aware, emotionally sophisticated. They knew what they were doing was wrong, but did it anyway to survive, then tried to make peace with the dead. That's remarkably human. At El Sidron Cave, the mother and infant who died together, isotope analysis shows the child was well fed until the end, even as the mother starved. She gave her child every calorie she could. prioritized the baby's survival over her own. The ultimate maternal sacrifice seen in species across the animal kingdom. But with Neanderthals, there's context. The carefully repaired clothing, the maintained shelter, the evidence of planning even as death approached. She was trying, fighting, refusing to give up right until the end. When they died, probably from starvation during an especially harsh winter, they died together, mother and child. The child still well nourished because mother gave everything. Mother emaciated from that sacrifice, both wearing clothing that had been mended multiple times. Evidence of care persisting through desperation. This is Neanderthal. This is human. This is what we inherited. The capacity for sacrifice. For love stronger than self-preservation. For trying even when hope fades. Have you ever sacrificed for someone you love? Gone without so they could have? Put their needs above your own? That's 60,000 years old. That's Neanderthal. That's what makes us human. The archaeological record can be cold. Numbers, measurements, chemical analyses, but behind every data point, a person behind every tool, hands that made it, behind every burial, grief, behind every healed fracture, care, behind every child's toy, love. We're not studying artifacts. We're studying people. People who lived and loved and suffered and died. People who were trying their best in incredibly hard circumstances. Dr. Penny Spickens, who studies Neanderthal emotions, tries to maintain that human connection, to see past the bones, to remember the people. When I hold a Neanderthal child's toy, I think about the parent who made it, the child who played with it, the laughter and joy that object represents. And then I remember they all died. That child grew up, or didn't, in a world we can barely imagine, but they were loved. That toy proves it. Museums are starting to incorporate this perspective, moving away from dry displays of artifacts toward human stories, emotional connections. We show photos of families, modern families, then show how Neanderthal families weren't so different. Both species caring for children, mourning the dead, creating art, living life. Visitors respond, they connect, they see themselves in Neanderthals. That's when the learning happens. When you realize these aren't alien beings, they're us, just 60,000 years ago. The genetic evidence proves it literally. We carry Neanderthal DNA. Their genes affect our immune systems, skin color, hair texture, pain tolerance, sleep patterns, depression susceptibility, COVID-19 severity. Neanderthal genes are still protecting us, still affecting our health, still shaping who we are. They didn't disappear. They merged with us. Some genes show strong positive selection, meaning they provided advantages, meaning evolution kept them, spread them, because they helped us survive. We inherit their Ice Age adaptations, their disease resistances, their survival traits. They're our ancestors. But we lost their cultural knowledge, and that loss might matter more, because genes adapt slowly. Culture adapts quickly. Genetic evolution takes thousands of years. Cultural evolution can happen in a generation. Neanderthals had 400,000 years of cultural evolution, and we lost most of it. Imagine what we might have learned, what technologies they might have taught us, what insights they'd accumulated, what solutions they'd developed, all gone. Lost in the demographic collapse, lost in the cultural assimilation, lost to time. Every elder who dies without teaching, we lose libraries of knowledge. With Neanderthals, we lost an entire civilization's worth. This is why preserving indigenous knowledge matters today, why documenting traditional techniques is urgent, why we can't afford to lose anymore. Because once it's gone, recovering it takes generations, if it's even possible. The Neanderthals taught us this lesson in the harshest way possible, through extinction, through disappearance, through silence. But we can still hear their voice in the archaeological record, in our DNA, in the skills we're rediscovering, in the values we still share. They're speaking to us across 30,000 years, across species boundaries, across the gulf between extinct and living, saying, remember what matters, remember how to survive, remember to care for each other, remember that technology without humanity is empty, remember that survival without compassion isn't truly survival. Remember us, learn from us, don't make our mistakes. The message is clear. The question is, are we listening? But perhaps their greatest achievement was invisible to archaeology. Until recently, the care they showed for each other, the compassion, the refusal to abandon anyone. At La Ferracie, that child with severe disabilities, 3 years of care in Ice Age conditions, when every calorie mattered, someone, probably the mother, carried that child everywhere, fed them, protected them, loved them for 3 years, knowing the child would never be independent, never contribute to survival in traditional ways, but doing it anyway, because the child was family, because you don't leave family behind, because some things matter more than efficiency. Have you ever cared for someone who couldn't care for themselves? The exhaustion, the sacrifice, the love that keeps you going despite the hardship. That's 60,000 years old. That's Neanderthal. That's human. At Shanidar, the partially blind man who lived for years after his injury. Someone fed him, protected him, valued him, even though he couldn't hunt, couldn't see threats, needed constant assistance. In a harsh environment, caring for disabled individuals is costly, but they did it repeatedly. It's not an exception, it's a pattern. Dr. Penny Spickens, who studies Neanderthal compassion, sees evidence throughout the archaeological record. Healed fractures showing long recovery periods. Skeletal anomalies showing survival despite disability. Elderly individuals showing signs of care in their final years. This is what makes us human, not technology, not big brains, but compassion. And Neanderthals had it 60,000 years ago. The burials showed the same pattern, care extending past death, graves dug deliberately, bodies positioned carefully, offerings left with the deceased. You don't bury the dead with ceremony unless you love them, unless their loss mattered. At La Chapelle aux Saints, an elderly man buried with tools. Someone dug that grave, positioned the body, arranged the tools, probably spoke words or performed rituals we'll never know, all for someone who had died, who could provide no benefit, but was honored anyway, because he mattered, because his life had meaning, because love persists beyond death. This is the heart of the Neanderthal story, not just survival, but humanity, not just technology, but compassion, not just intelligence, but love. And these qualities, encoded partially in our genes, but mostly in our choices, remain our greatest strength. The lesson from Neanderthals isn't about stone tools or fire making. It's about who we choose to be, when conditions are harsh, when resources are scarce, when survival is difficult? Do we abandon the vulnerable, or do we carry them? Do we hoard resources, or do we share? Do we fragment into competing groups, or do we cooperate? The Neanderthals chose cooperation, chose compassion, chose community for 400,000 years. And those choices worked until they didn't, until change came too fast, until populations became too small, until the last groups disappeared into modern human populations or died in isolation. But their choices, their values, their humanity, those didn't disappear. Those live on in our genes, in our behaviors, in our capacity for compassion despite hardship. When we care for the elderly, when we protect the disabled, when we help those who can't help themselves, we're being Neanderthal in the best possible way. Their story challenges us, not just to learn their technologies, though those remain valuable, but to remember their values, to honor their choices, to recognize that survival without compassion isn't truly human survival. It's just existence. The archaeological record, for all its limitations, shows one clear pattern. Neanderthals chose to be human in the fullest sense, even when it was costly, even when it was difficult, even when it endangered their own survival. They chose love over efficiency, community over individualism, care over abandonment. And in doing so, they showed us what matters most. Not fire, not tools, not even survival itself, but what we're willing to do for each other, who we're willing to be, what we're willing to sacrifice for family, for community, for each other. That's the Neanderthal legacy. That's what we inherited. That's what we must preserve. Because technologies change, environments change, challenges change, but the choice to care for each other, to refuse to abandon anyone, to build communities based on cooperation rather than competition, that choice remains eternal. That choice defines humanity. And Neanderthals, our extinct cousins, our genetic ancestors, made that choice for 400,000 years, until the end. May we be wise enough to learn from both their successes and their failures, strong enough to adapt like they adapted, compassionate enough to care like they cared, and resilient enough to survive what's coming. Because the climate is changing again, faster than Neanderthals ever faced, and this time we can't escape to another continent, can't wait for evolution to adapt our bodies, can't rely on demographic size alone. We need what Neanderthals had: ingenuity, adaptability, community, and the refusal to accept impossibility. They survived 400,000 winters without fire. Can we survive the next century with all our technology? That depends on us, on our choices, on whether we remember what Neanderthals taught us, not through books or lectures, but through their bones and stones and DNA. The lesson is simple. Survival requires technology, but humanity requires more. It requires compassion, community, care. Neanderthals gave us both, their genes in our bodies, their example in the archaeological record, their challenge to us today. Can we be as ingenious, as adaptive, as compassionate, as human? The answer will determine our future, just as similar choices determine theirs. But this isn't the end of the story, because ancient peoples around the world developed extraordinary survival technologies. Technologies we're only beginning to understand. In the high Andes Mountains, at altitudes even more extreme than Neanderthals experienced, The Inca civilization conquered conditions that should have been impossible, developing technology so sophisticated they challenge modern science, and leaving behind mysteries that haunt archaeologists today. If you want to understand how the Inca survived at 22,000 feet, if you want to know about 3 children found frozen on a volcano, if you want to see what happened when ancient survival technology met religious devotion, the story continues in 500 Years Preserved, the story of Inca children's lives. Because what archaeologists discovered on that mountain will change how you see ancient civilizations forever. The link is on your screen now. Watch it next.